Welcome. You're listening to the Season 5 of the Young Changemakers podcast. This is a Global Changemakers production. If you would like to know more about the programs and the resources available for you, go check global-changemakers.net.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Young Changemakers podcast. Today, I am very excited. We have the privilege of speaking with Shawntel Nieto. Shawntel is an inspiring young activist and professional who is deeply committed to food security, disaster relief, sustainability, and public policy. I personally had the chance to meet Shawntel in Switzerland during the Global Youth Summit of Global Changemakers back in 2017. It's been already a long time since that first time we met, but I have witnessed her activism, witnessed her progress, and witnessed everything she has done for a sustainable Philippines. So I'm very excited to have her here in the program today. Shawntel, it is a pleasure to have you here. Could you please introduce yourself and share the causes that you're passionately advocating for?
Thanks for having me here, Meigan, and to the entire GCM team. Always a pleasure to be with GCM family. So my name is Shawntel Nieto. I am a 27-year-old changemaker from the Philippines. I currently serve as the co-founder and president of the One Kainta Food Program and of Sustainable PH. I also serve as the co-founder of the Sustainable Podcast and of the Society of Sustainability Practitioners. So for all of these organizations, my focus has always been simple. It's in poverty alleviation, sustainability, as well as an overarching goal of advancing true, inclusive, just, and sustainable development here in the Philippines.
Thank you, Shawntel. Thank you for sharing with us about all these initiatives that you are advocating for. I would love to delve into one of them, which is the One Kainta Food Program. This program has made significant impact. I would like for you to please tell us more about the inspiration behind starting this initiative and the context in the Philippines that led you to take action.
Well, the One Kainta Food Program, I'd say, is an initiative that wasn't necessarily planned. You know how sometimes organizations come about out of careful strategic planning and actual investment into a particular, say, initiative or cause. Our One Kainta Food Program came about because of an urgent need to support marginalized communities, especially at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, as we all know, March 2020, the COVID pandemic started, and at least here in the Philippines, that meant a nationwide lockdown that initially was only supposed to last for a month, but ended up spanning, I think, 1.5 years. And throughout those months, years that we were on lockdown, it was very, very difficult for, I think, almost all Filipinos to really find means to put food on the table. My parents are both doctors, especially within government hospitals. And so even before the lockdowns started, it was just, at that point, they were just rumors. My dad's patients would, speak with him, chat during, say, OPDs and tell them, Doc, if the lockdown would only really last for 2 weeks, we can still manage. But if it's true that it'll last for a month, I don't know where we're supposed to get their money from. And the reality for a lot of Filipinos here is that if you don't show up to work, you don't really get paid. And so if you're on lockdown for a month, you don't get the whole month's salary. And for people who live, hand to mouth, that's nearly impossible. So when the lockdowns did start, my family and we understood that there was going to be a really huge and urgent need to support communities get by day to day. And so what we did was we knew we had contacts here and there. We had a good network of partners, people, friends. And so we simply contacted them one after another to see who might be willing to help. So I reached out to one of my former badminton teammates. Her family used to own a chocolate snack manufacturing brand. So they donated chocolate snacks, 20 to 30 boxes of chocolate snacks. My brother Mike reached out to his best friend Jamo, who owns Manila Catering. They donated our first set of, I think it was like 500 pieces of bread, and 500 pieces of macaroni salad. And then a former classmate of mine, Franco, was working at this, I think this company called Gamesville Corporation. So he reached out to me and said they wanted to donate 2,000 to 5,000 reusable face masks. And what we did was we partnered with our local government here in the town so that we can have logistical support in as far as distributing these goods door to the communities was concerned. So we started there and the distributions went fine. So we continued reaching out to more and more companies, first within our circles, and then as say the weeks passed by, we were able to execute a good amount of documentation, at least enough for us to put together a nice brief showing our traction so far. And we used this brief to reach out to even more companies and corporations we were no longer really connected to. Thankfully, they trusted us and our, partnership with the local government enough to believe that we really were going to make good use of the goods they were going to donate. And so that went on and on and on. And of course, the lockdowns extended, and so did our food program. Towards the end of 2020, I was really adamant on trying to find a way to keep a steady source of food flowing into our food program. Of course, always cognizant of the fact that donor fatigue is present, and companies, they could donate, but how many times would a one-time big time kind of deal happen, right? So thankfully, our first adopter, URC, the Universal Robina Corporation, tested something out with us. They gave us their near expiry produce that we were then tasked to distribute immediately to our partner communities, and we did so. And thankfully, this merited greater amount of trust and credibility, a good relationship between us and the corporation. And this was a model that we sought to replicate to other partner companies, restaurants, catering corporations. And so now what we do is we've partnered with over, 80 organizations. After 3 years, we've been able to really distribute about 1.5 million food hampers across 700,000 people within 20 cities and 11 hospitals. And a good chunk of it are produce, food items that within a few weeks' time would have expired but are very much still in good quality, that we distributed right on time, door to door or center to center, to our partner communities, hospitals, and sectors. So up until today, even as the COVID-19 pandemic recedes, we understand that, of course, hunger doesn't. And so we continue to foster these partnerships and look for ways to provide support and help to communities in order to help them get by day.
That is impressive, Shawntel. Really, thank you so much for sharing and delving into your initiative with so much detail. I think I would love to highlight some of the key moments that you mentioned. Right now, it's the fact that you built a strategic network of partnerships. Some of these partnerships, you already had them. They were friends, they were people you knew, but at the same time, you started contacting different organizations, different enterprises. So that is something that I definitely think played a crucial role in the success of the program, as well as other factors. But I would like to zoom into this part that you mentioned. And I can imagine that it can be hard, right, to manage a big network of people, a big network of volunteers, and also with the partners. So what advice would you offer to fellow activists that are looking to establish effective partnerships for their projects?
I think it's always important to, focus on 3 C's: clarity, communication, and credibility. These are 3 C's that I always ensure my team, my family, and I uphold with any partnership we enter. So the first one is clarity. If you want to get into any type of partnership, for any kind of ask, the first thing you have to be sure of is what your ask is. What are you in there for? What do you need? What are you gonna do about the partnership, about the cause? It's very important that you're clear. And we're not just talking about, say, being clear about what you say. It's about making sure that you understand what you really want. So that's the first key thing that you have to be sure of. I think a lot of potential is wasted when you come into a conversation or a discussion, a partnership discussion, without really knowing what you're there for and what this partnership could lead to. Of course, we can't discount the need to always be open to whatever opportunity opens up before us, but it doesn't hurt. And in fact, it very much helps to be clear about what you need. And then the second C is to communicate it effectively. So one key tip I always give people is to really know who you're speaking with. So in marketing, you call it your KYCs, your know your customer, know your client. So it's very important to know who you're speaking with. One, so you know how to speak with them, what types of formalities to use, but also so that you understand what their interests really are. So when people ask me, how do you convince someone to do something? How do you convince someone to get involved in something? I always say, meet them where they're at. Hit them where it hurts, because that's also where their biggest gains and wishes are. And you'd want to be able to tap into that. You'd want to be able to leverage on that in order for them to actually gain interest in what you're saying. You're not going to be able to convince someone who doesn't hear you. The first step is to get someone to look at you, to hear you. And to do so, usually with so many different things pulling people in multiple directions, it's hard to get their attention. So it's best to really phrase things, to frame them based on what interests the person in front of you. So definitely know your customer, know who you're speaking with, and then practice how it is to pitch to them. So practice your pitch, know your story, know your, organizational description, know what you're there for, your key activities. It's a waste to have such an amazing initiative, project, or activity, but one that doesn't have, say, the communication strategy or the comms plan that could really effectively communicate it to other people. So it's very, very important to practice how best to communicate your cause to a wide array of different audiences that might need to hear about it. And the last C is credibility. So say you land a particular project, they give you their trust. It's very, very, very important that you not only cherish, but you protect that trust. That's basically what I always tell my teams, our volunteers, even my grandmother. Like, I keep telling her, like, trust is the only currency we're really working at here. Without trust, without this currency, no one's gonna donate to us anymore. No one's going to accept what we give. If we let ourselves go, if we let things slide here and there, we lose that trust little by little, and then we'll be nothing. So it's very, very important that once you set clear objectives, deliverables, and timelines with your partner, you're able to communicate it, and you're also able to establish effective communication and reporting dynamics between yourself and the partner, that you stick to it. And if at times there are delays, there are shortcomings, there are challenges, communicate it properly. You'd want to be able to protect that trust as much as possible, because it's very, very hard to earn and very, very easy to lose. And especially when we're talking about partnerships, I swear, trust is the primary currency you'd want to have a lot of, and you'd want to protect to the best of your ability.
Definitely. I think I would love to delve into credibility. I mean, I think what you said is very accurate. And also, we see it in our day to day life experiences, no, beyond activism, beyond other type of partnerships. Trust is very important. And I really love the phrase that you mentioned, like the currency at the moment is that, right? It is trust. So I would love for everyone who is listening to us, the change makers, or anyone who has a question on how to establish a valuable and a long-term partnership. I think these are very key perspectives. So, being clear, having credibility, and communication. So, thank you so much for sharing these very clear 3C schemes with us. And yes, I think I can highlight a lot of skills that you showed for running this program. Also, we talked a little bit about the financial aspect. How is it that you recognize that there was donor fatigue and you kept trying with many different strategies? But I'm also very curious about what other skills have you been equipped with this experience, or do you think that have been brought to light with this experience? Specifically, we both met in a Global Changemaker Summit in Switzerland, and there we had our training with different skills. I remember we had some workshops on public speaking, some on design thinking. So I would love for you to think about your involvement with Global Changemakers throughout the years. What moment or what workshop or what do you think around your involvement with Global Changemakers contributed to your growth as an activist and gave you a valuable skill to run a program of this kind?
Whenever I talk about GCM and my GCM experience, I always say that the biggest, most important thing I got from it was the belief that I can. Like, I always tell people, GCM allowed me to dream bigger than I ever had. So I remember us being at Erzberg way back in 2017, and we were there with 59, 60 other people, just, nearly our age, doing amazing things. I know Tracy had, I think, a school, right? The school for the blind in Kenya. We had Lynn coming into, I think, BCG at the time for consulting. We had a couple of people heading into Ivy Leagues. We had so many different things. I think Aru was it? No. I think I'm speaking about someone else. But basically, someone was coming in to talk to the UN in Switzerland. Maybe it was Marie Claire or something. Basically, what I got from that whole experience was the idea that if these people who over the course of the week not only became my peers but my friends could do these things that I thought were reserved for only, the exceptional few, then maybe because they're my friends, they're my peers, then I can do that as well. Like, these ideas, these accomplishments, these milestones stopped becoming so distant, if only because they were now being done by people who were right next to me, who were within my circle. And I think that's something that I've carried with me all throughout. And so when we started the idea of the One Kainta food program, honestly, like, who were we to start contacting companies, especially those who we weren't connected to, we didn't know anyone in. Who were we to go on and say we want to help the local government? And in fact, I think just 4 weeks after we launched in Cainta, we already started a partnership with the church in Caloocan to also support a couple of communities there. And then beyond that, eventually we reached one city after the other as well. So who are we to go in and try something there? It was really just this idea that so long as your intentions are pure, your plans are laid out, and you're able to deliver, there's nothing that's too distant for you to be able to accomplish. And I think this confidence, this belief, this optimism is something that I owe GCM a lot. And I've carried with me throughout. And I guess beyond that, of course, when we talk about skill sets, uh, public speaking, pitching, communication is definitely one aspect that is very much needed. We already talked about this earlier. But I think one key workshop that stood out for me during at least the second summit I attended, 2018, was the active listening and coaching workshop during one of our, I think it was an unconference, in fact. It started my desire to explore how to listen better. And in that process, since 2018, I've learned a couple of different, things about listening, active listening. And it's allowed me to, I guess, better look at problems from perspectives beyond my own. It's allowed me to be more open to how issues are experienced, to how realities are lived. And I guess in a sense, this helps fuel some level of innovation, if not empathy, within the work that I do. And so now, when we talk about, like, for instance, this food program, I always say it's co implemented with the communities because at the end of the day, we're not the ones out there constantly distributing these goods. It's the community leaders, and especially here in Cainta, we have a community leader per alley, and so it's neighbors helping their neighbors out on a constant basis. And for us, it's actually pretty normal, but when people hear it, they're like, wow, it's such a community driven initiative, and we don't even use those jargons or those buzzwords anymore. We just think it's normal. But I think it's something that I owe to the training and the skills that GCM helped open for me, and that helped me want to explore over the years.
Thank you, Shawntel. I hear your comments and I resonate so much with them. Going back to the very first thing that you mentioned, I think I agree with you with the fact that global change makers help me to believe that I can. And I also think that it's a very important skill. I think it's part of empowerment because in order to lead a project of this magnitude, of this kind, it is important to be able to do it, of course, like as we mentioned with skills like being able to obtain financing, being able to have key partnerships, but at the same time, you need to be able to believe that you can do it and want to do it and have the desire to do it. So now that I was listening to you, that definitely brought me back to the summit. And I even remember one part of the summit where we were supposed to leave our kryptonites aside, and we would I don't remember if we had to write it or we have to say it.
Oh, yeah, I do
Right?
remember that.
Right? Yeah, that was something that I will always remember because I remember my kryptonite. It was something related to I need to leave my fears aside. I need to leave my fear or my disbelief on that I cannot do it aside. And that's something that is very empowering because you need to believe that you can do it. And that's something that we always say to everyone that is listening. We try to motivate them that you can do it, even if you're like in your sofa, you can get started with Twitter. You can do something now not Twitter anymore, but I mean with social media. So thank you for sharing this. I think it's something very powerful for everyone that maybe isn't sure, no, or they hear this story and they're like, wow, it's like already almost like it's a national initiative, right? The one that you're running. So I think it's impressive, and it all started with believing that I can do it, and then of course employing all the other skills. But also I would love to, we're now actually about to finish these questions about the project. It's just that we find it very interesting, and I wanted to ask you now, moving on from the skills but delving into the topic of food security. You said that your work is also centered on relieving poverty, and I think that is a perfect example because, as you very well mentioned in the beginning, if you don't work for a month, if you don't receive your salary for a month, if this happens during a pandemic, then people, of course, are going to struggle to eat, to be able to find food to eat. They're going to struggle to survive. So your project has been doing a lot to guarantee food security. And if we see poverty as a multidimensional issue, then it's definitely contributing to reducing poverty because it is providing people with food, which is very important as well for people to live with quality. So I would love to hear your perspective on food security. Now, if we move on to a national scale, what broader changes do you believe are necessary to enhance food security on a national scale in your country, in the Philippines?
So definitely, although I would, I guess, humble myself up a bit and say I don't really think our project contributes as much to food security. Maybe we do just let people get by. We aren't able to provide all of their meals for them. Although, to be fair, over the past 2 years, our One Kainta food program has gone beyond kainta, and two, gone beyond food. So we do try to put in some education and livelihood or employment programs so that through food we help people get by, but through education and livelihood or employment we help them rise above poverty, because at the end of the day you're gonna want to be able to increase a person's economic income and opportunities in order to support them out of poverty. But of course, going beyond that, when we talk about food security on a macro level, at least here in the Philippine setting, I think there's a huge need to revive, for instance, our agricultural sector. Common Filipinos would probably go and say that we're an agricultural country, but the fact of the matter is that growth in the sector has been declining for decades, and we've been having a difficult time reviving it. But there's a need to strengthen it in order to foster a relatively more self-sufficient food system and supply chain here in the country. I think the COVID pandemic has shown us that although there's merit and efficiency to globalized, very streamlined supply chains, without a robust system internally, we're very vulnerable to what's happening beyond our control globally. And if these chains get cut here and there, we could lose precious commodity here and there. So one, there's a very strong need to strengthen our local agricultural system, and I think our local supply chain in and by itself is in need of some strengthening. So investments not just in technology but also in infrastructure is very much called for. An increase in the, I guess, incentives and support obtained by people in local economies in the agricultural sector is also very important. I think the average age of our farmer pretty much merits them to have a senior citizen ID already. So pretty much we want to be able to revive that. We want to be able to get more members of the youth interested again, not just in agriculture, but in agri-innovation, agri-tech, so that we can really create a more robust system. I think we also need a stronger, I guess, hand at managing the data that comes in. We need to make better economic decisions. Over the past months, we've seen immense rises in the prices of commodities such as onions, eggs, sugar, and all of these were a result of really the slightest decisions in terms of whether or not to import a particular commodity by a certain date. And I saw some figures, and these dates were just weeks apart, and it made me understand and really realize how important it is to have their experts come in and really help our leadership make the wisest decision, because each macro level decision you make has micro level effects on even day-to-day goods, such as, again, onions, eggs, sugar. So that's one. Another aspect that I think always has to be emphasized within the Philippine system is that of good governance. We have to be able to, at the best of our ability, get rid of corruption, get rid of unfair competition and exploitation within supply chains. One, corruption leads to poor infrastructure builds. I don't know how it is in Mexico, but here, it can be difficult to develop an area, develop what's needed if you're only really getting maybe 1/4 of the actual quality, because the other 3/4 was pretty much shared to corruption, to someone else's wallet. So if we want to be able to push for proper development within industries, within areas and cities, we really want to be able to put up a strong foundation of good governance. And I think good governance also entails proper monitoring and evaluation of projects and programs. I was at a talk earlier, and at the end of the day, you want to have your facts straight. You want to be able to really see systems for what they are, so that you know how best to pivot and edit things. And I think one of the issues we have here is that we don't always plan things properly. And even if we do and then we implement, we tend to leave the monitoring and evaluation to the minimum. And so we don't leave much opportunity for us to improve. So I guess that's a bit more general. It could apply for food security, it could apply to other issues, but generally, at the end of the day, we really have, once again, to we have to revive our agricultural sector. We want to be able to invest and develop more innovations, more investments into the space, into our own local supply chains. And we want to be able as well to, I guess, ground all of those on a solid foundation of good governance, monitoring, and evaluation, so that one, we make the best and wisest, most data-driven decisions, and two, we want to make sure we make the most out of people's taxes, people's trust. And I guess one last factor to it is the importance also of ensuring that people get equitable returns for their labor, for their time and effort. At the end of the day, food security isn't just a question of how much food is available in your country. It's actually a question of how accessible food is, and accessibility is a factor not only of availability or of, say, distance to a particular commodity or source, but it's also a question of whether or not they can afford it, whether or not we like it. We're in a capitalist society, and we have to be able to afford and pay for the goods we want to be able to consume and have. And so it's very, very important that we also look into to sectors, to industries beyond food. We want to be able to see if the people there are obtaining livable wages, if the people themselves are able to afford basic commodities, and if not, what programs, what initiatives, what policies should we put in place in order to ensure that people get better access to capabilities, to opportunities, to living conditions and working conditions, and compensations that would allow them to live more and get access to what they need in terms of commodities, needs, and services.
Definitely, as you mentioned, that food security is an interconnected issue. So it is important to make sure that, as you said, there's fair wages. There's also work on innovation, work on reducing corruption. You were asking me, how I'm not sure how it is in Mexico, but I think pretty much in every country around the world, corruption undermines development, it hampers development, and it not only hurts development, as a whole, but it can also lead to the misallocation of resources, misallocation of many things, which reduces social welfare in general. So, yeah, I think you brought up some very important points, and I would just like to ask you about your perspective on emergencies, because you started this project during an emergency, which was the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And this required a quick action from you. So beyond the advice of acting quickly, is there any other advice that you would provide to anyone that would like to provide effective relief during a crisis?
I think I'd say, so you did bring up act quickly. I think I'd build that up by saying also adapt quickly. So it's one thing to act, quickly, but it's also very important to always be mindful of what's happening, what the effects of our actions are, so that we can adapt and adjust accordingly. So, monitor and evaluate, assess, reflect on what you're doing, what the effects are, what the causes leading to these effects are, so that you know what you need to change or tweak in order to get better results. So that's, I guess, point number 1 or 2: adapt quickly. The second or third point is to partner up as well. So we don't always have to have all the resources at our disposal. We don't have to know everything. We can't do that, but we always can and should learn how to speak with and partner up with individuals, teams, or organizations that have the resources, expertise, or opportunities and networks that we need in order to do what we need to do for our work. So, be in a look, understand what your needs are, be in the lookout, know where you can find these people or organizations, and then reach out and build these partnerships. It makes your life so much easier. So I'd say those 2 or 3 things could really help someone react to a particular emergency and sustain that response for a long period of time.
All right, thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I mean, as I've been telling you, I think this project is fantastic, and it has had an impact that is worth sharing. That's why we wanted to have you here in this podcast. We wanted to know, how did you do it? Because we saw the results, and it was just fantastic that we wanted to know, well, how everything started, how you navigated the challenges. So thank you for sharing this. But yeah, for everyone that is listening to us, Shawntel, in the beginning, she also mentioned that she also runs other programs. She's leading other initiatives, and I would just love for you to share with us your perspective on sustainability and education, because I know your engagement in this area is also an important part of your activism. So just very generally, I would love to ask you, why is education for sustainable development a priority for you and something important for you in your activism?
I think sustainability is everyone's job. So, for our nonprofit, Sustainable PH, we started it because we believe that no one leader, whether you're the president, you're the CEO of the biggest company, you're the best person in the whole entire world, can really change the world, or the country at least, for the better, or at least to the magnitude or extent that we need them to. So no one leader can create the sustainable Philippines that we need. But if we make leaders out of each and every person, regardless of where they are, regardless of what their role is, and if they drive sustainability in that role, then maybe if you put all of that collective action together, then we stand a chance. And so, if you notice, if that is our, say, theory of change, if that's our hypothesis, then education plays such a critical role, because first and foremost, to drive sustainability where you are, you have to know, 1, what is sustainability, and 2, how does it apply to where I'm at now, what my context is, and then 3, how do I then now drive it in order to leave positive good? Because the thing is, when we act, it can lead to good things, but it can also lead to bad things. So we want to make sure that we're planning, we're strategizing, and we're mindful enough to constantly act towards a good and positive outcome. And so that's where education comes in. It's very important that we start with the facts, that we know what we're working with, and to the best of our ability, we're equipped to plan, to strategize, to implement, and then to adapt our actions based on what's happening in reality as a result of it. And so, once again, that's why we started Sustainable PH, so we can educate and we can train a myriad of different stakeholders, from professionals to members of the youth to organizations or companies on sustainability and how they themselves, within their context, within the Philippine setting, can drive sustainability and sustainable development forward.
All right, so thank you so much for sharing this with us, Chantel. I really love what you said at the beginning, that sustainability is everyone's duty. And for that, you need to be equipped, you need to be prepared. Education is very important. So I definitely agree with what you're doing. And I would actually love to hear more about your approach to education. How is it that you do it? Especially with your initiatives like Sustainable PH that you already introduced. Could you please share with us what is your approach to educating people about sustainability?
So, I guess it's a two-pronged approach. First and foremost, um, we, I guess from the back end of it, what we do is we co-design everything with experts that actually practice and know the topic well. And so when we come up with a bespoke training program for a company or an organization on sustainability or a branch of it, we make sure that the speaker, the trainer, or the person we're co-designing the workshop or the training program in is an actual expert in it. And not to bash anyone for honestly, but sometimes that's the thing with consultants, like they don't really know what they're saying, but they're consultants either way. So with us, we really, and I don't like that because I feel like it's so ingenuine to come up and say something that you've never really practiced before. And so for me, I really try to ensure that when someone comes in and trains a particular client, they really are an expert, or this session was really co-designed with an expert in the field. And we don't try to pretend to be knowledgeable about aspects that we're not completely knowledgeable about. So that's one aspect on the back end, a methodology, I'd suppose, or a technique that we really uphold in the organization and as far as creating these programs are concerned. The second aspect of it, I guess, is likened or can be likened to an earlier, I guess, insight or concept that I've shared. It's when you look at it from a front end perspective, you want to be able to meet people where they're at. And so for all of our training programs, we always look into where a particular client, person, or organization is. What is their maturity like within, say, the sustainability sphere? What is their context? What are the trends, risks, and opportunities present within their context? In sustainability, especially sustainability reporting, we have this concept called materiality, where you want to look at the material, so the impactful or relevant issues to your organization. And so we, I guess, practice that form or that concept, that exercise when evaluating a company or a client or a person's context in sustainability. And then we tailor fit the program towards or around those material issues so that what they get in return is a program, a workshop, or a speaking engagement that's very much easy to immediately apply to their setting. So it's not just, say, a dictation of the textbook definition of what sustainability is. It's actually us working with them to understand what sustainability looks like for them, what is material for them in relation to sustainability, and how they can move forward from here. And so far, I'd like to say that we really have received positive feedback from the people that we've trained, so to speak, to our Learn to Lead Sustainability program. So it's a 10-week course on sustainability management, starting from the fundamentals, and then you go into materiality, climate change, laws and governance, circular economy. You go into the sustainability theory into practice through, say, urban mobility, waste management, plastic management, food systems, and then you sort of cap it off with a module on communicating sustainability to the public, to through reporting and through building a sustainability culture in your team. The graduates also come up with their own capstone projects that we mentor them through over the next 2 months after graduation so they can really implement it in their organization. So we've received like really great feedback from our graduates there, and also great feedback from the companies and organizations we design these bespoke sustainability training programs and workshops for. I guess at the end of the day, it's really about one, localizing the context, making it as relevant, applied, and contextual as you can to the realities of the person or the organization you're trying to train, and then knowing who you need to work with, who you need to co-design with in order to really create the most accurate, most up-to-date, and the best training program you can give to your trainees here in the country.
Thank you for sharing about your approach. I think it's very complete and it's very diverse on the topics as well. So one more time, thank you so much for delving into it with so much detail. Unfortunately, we're almost about to reach the end of this episode. So far, we have talked about your engagement with the One Kind of Food program. We have also talked about your engagement in sustainability and education. And to start closing this episode, I would love to hear your final insights and your words of advice and inspiration on two specific topics. The first one is that the role of young people is important to achieve development as a whole. We know that. But I would love to hear more about what do you see as the key contribution of young people in the specific field of sustainability and food security?
I think young people will always have the energy, the spirit, and maybe even the time that older people don't always have for a myriad of reasons. So you want to be able to really leverage on that and contribute that. So your older people, say more seasoned executives, professionals, experts, would have the breadth of experience and wisdom that comes with it. Now, what you'd want to do is you'd want to be able to learn from them, to absorb that, to get their mentorship, their guidance, their direction even, and then to use the energy, the time, the stamina and endurance you have to execute the legwork, the activities that'll push an initiative forward. And I'm coming from the standpoint of someone who wasn't my 21-year-old self anymore when she was at GCM. I'm 27 years old, and although technically I still am part of the youth, I do carry with me, say, the responsibilities I have within these organizations and all of that sort. And so some of the legwork, in fact, I can't do anymore. And even within my own peers, in fact, some of my peers, for instance, are starting families, have, demanding day jobs and all that sort. So there are some things that we can really no longer do that we see members of the youth really doing very fast. And so I think the ability to really go out there, do the legwork, do the work, and then get guidance and support and partner up with organizations, institutions, or even just generally more seasoned professionals, executives, mentors, coaches, would already be such a huge contribution to whatever solution we're forming. I think at the end of the day, the best solutions are those that are co-created with a diverse set of stakeholders. So it's not just, members of the youth coming together to do their thing, and then you have the professionals doing their thing, and then you have another set or another generation doing their thing. But it's really about each stakeholder coming in, offering what they can that others might not be able to have, and then just raising their hand and trying to be as big a part of the solution as you can. So that's one aspect of it. And another aspect, I think, I basically pull from a member of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that we interviewed way back in 2020. So I also run a podcast called Sustain a Rumble. And so we interviewed this person, and we did ask him about what the advantage or disadvantage of being a youth, being a member of the youth is, especially as far as, say, the field of the circular economy is concerned. And he always said that the biggest advantage of being a young person within this field is the fact that you haven't really been immersed in the system for such a long period of time just yet. And so you still have these fresh eyes that can spot what others may have already missed because they're so used to doing things this way. And I think this is an opportunity, but also a challenge for so many young people to really actively look for those gaps, those shortcomings in the system that those who have been in the system for quite a while have already missed because they're so used to it, and then build up the courage and the partnerships to be able to take up enough space to have your voice heard. Because it's one thing to identify these gaps or these opportunities for improvements, and it's another thing to be able to get people to hear it. So I think it's an open challenge for young people to really, capitalize on this opportunity, these fresh eyes that we don't always have or we don't always get to keep forever. And so, yeah, I guess in terms of contributions to sustainability, sustainable development, that's another key thing I'd suggest. And I guess the last thing would be really to leverage on how tech savvy the young people really are. I mean, it amazes me how quickly they pick up coding, TikTok, all of these different technologies, these new advancements, AI. It's your forte. You've grown up, you've been born with it, already part or embedded in your reality. You're natives, basically, digital natives. And especially given the demand we have for technologies that will really help us, say, reduce our carbon emissions, improve our supply chains, make more climate resilient crops or whatnot, improve our logistics so that we could pretty much enable food and other necessities to be more accessible to the everyday person. All of these different things require a good amount of knowledge, understanding, and playing around with technology and innovation. And I think that's where the tech savviness, the smarts, and the innovativeness of the youth can come in. Again, partner up with all of these different institutions like GCM to really make it happen, bring it to reality, bring it to the market, and pretty much help us create the best, most optimal solutions we have for these age-old problems that we've been facing, we've been trying to mitigate, and these new problems that are also surfacing because of, unfortunately, like phenomena such as like the climate change, back then the COVID-19 pandemic, and so on and so forth. So those are the top three things I'd say that the youth can contribute towards strengthening sustainability, sustainable development, and even food security across the world.
Definitely. I mean, you brought up some very important points. I agree with you. Technology, the knowledge on technology, the fresh eyes, innovation, energy. There's also many young people who are, as we have mentioned, professionals in the field. So it's very important that we acknowledge the contributions that youth can bring to these efforts. And as the last question, now that we have very clearly explained and that you have contributed with a very detailed explanation on how is it that young people are vital for achieving security and sustainability. I would love to hear an advice that you could offer to young individuals who are listening to us and who are working towards sustainability or food security or engaging in disaster relief efforts. What advice would you give to them coming from a young activist in in the field like you?
When I was in college, someone once said that it's not about the enterprise, it's about the entrepreneur. I took business and chemistry in college, and so we were really challenged to wear a very entrepreneurial hat. And of course, somewhere down that line, I pivoted into social entrepreneurship and then to sustainable development. But I think the saying still rings true in this field, that it's not always about the enterprise or your first big idea, your first big project. It's about the entrepreneur, it's about you. When I was at the Dalai Lama Fellowship, there was a quote that goes, "Nothing is created externally or outside that isn't already present inside." And this talks about how our work and the results of our work will inevitably be tied with and influenced by our values, our states of being, our capabilities. And so at the end of the day, again, it's not about the enterprise, it's about the entrepreneur. My very first social enterprise, BMB Solutions, after about 2.5 to 3 years, got dissolved because my co-founders and I felt as if we weren't the proper people to be leading something that big that soon. And I was shattered for a good year because of that. I became jaded. I didn't know if social impact was even really possible because I failed, so to speak. We weren't able to achieve what we wanted with BNB. And then after a year or so, from 2018 to 2019, I was also trying a myriad of different things, trying to create another BNB, but to no avail. And I thought, oh, maybe I lost it. I lost the magic. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. And then 2020 hit, and my triplets, I like to call them my triplets, they were born. The One Kenta food program, Sustainable PH, Sustainable Rumble. And I realized that during those drought years, I would call it my drought years, where nothing was happening post BMB. I was actually growing in perspective, in skills, in, I guess, network as well, in mindfulness about what I truly value, what I truly want to offer my life to, and what I want to build. And when the opportunity hit for me to do something, whether in the field of, say, food security or sustainability, then suddenly it may seem as if it all happened at the same time all at once, but in fact, it was just me being able to execute now what maybe back then I wasn't able to before, because I didn't have the skills, the perspective, the experiences that I have had over the next couple of years after BMB. And I say this because I want, and I know it's anticlimactic or whatnot for an ending piece of advice to not be, you can do this, you can change the world. But I speak because I know that many people who might be listening right now, maybe at their first, maybe taking their first shot at a social impact, at creating something, or maybe they're actually reeling with maybe their first loss, or their first shot at a mistake or at failure, or maybe they're still exploring and figuring things out. And I know that when you're at that state, because I've been there, and I know at some point I might even go back to that. I don't know who's to really say. That it's very easy to go on and say, maybe it's not for me, maybe I'm not cut out for this. But the fact of the matter is, it's always going to be a journey. And what matters is you keep moving, you keep trying to grow, and you keep seizing to the best of your ability the opportunities to do good that come your way. At the end of the day, it's not about the enterprise. It's not about any one enterprise. It's about the entrepreneur. And so long as you keep yourself grounded in your values, you keep your intentions pure, and you constantly try to make sure you as an activist, as a change maker, constantly become better and better, your work follows. Whatever that might be, whatever form it might take. It might be the very first enterprise you started. It might be your fourth or fifth. But it'll follow, as it has followed for me. And so that is hopefully what many change makers would realize and remember, that it's not always going to be a bed of roses. It's not always going to be one award after another. And at times when you're not at the peak of the mountain, but in fact you're at the valley, just know that it's a journey. It's a trek that you have to trek. And each step you take, so long as it makes you a better person, will get you closer and closer to your desired destination. So keep going at it. Know that there's no such thing as it's not cut out for you, that you don't have any magic, you can't do it. It's just a matter of timing, opportunity, and you constantly pushing at it, going at it, and trying your best to be at service for that which is greater than yourself. Everything else, all the outcomes, all the outputs will follow. And hopefully, knowing that gives you hope, that more hope, in fact, that actually, whether you start on a high note or you don't, you truly can actually do it. You can actually make it.
Thank you, Shawntel. And yeah, definitely for everyone listening, as Shawntel said, keeping these last words, you can actually do it. You can actually make it. Thank you so much, Shawntel, for sharing with us your experience, sharing with us also this inspiring message. And again, thank you so much for being part of the Young Changemakers podcast.
Of course, thank you for having me, and thank you for just GCM existing in general. I love GCM. I'm biased. I mean, I have to love GCM. But again, thanks for having me here.